Hey folks, David Stewart here. So how would you have felt if you didn't eat breakfast yesterday? This is called a conditional hypothetical, and this example is from originally a 4chan post that has gone kind of viral over the last few months, from a guy who supposedly studied the intelligence of prisoners in prison, and as expected, he found that many of them were rather on the low side as far as IQ goes. But he found that certain people that were like below 90 IQ, like in what we would call the shady 80s, can't understand conditional hypotheticals. So if you ask them, and this was the example he gave in the post, how would you feel if you hadn't eaten breakfast yesterday? They would respond, but I did eat breakfast yesterday, meaning they can't hypothesize about how a different action would have led to a different conclusion. That might explain why they're in prison, as they aren't thinking about how their actions are going to alter the future, and when they have a negative consequence, they don't think about how they could have done things differently in the past to arrive at a different point than where they're at currently. And this is something that you can expect to find with people that are very low on the IQ scale, is that they don't plan for the future and they have a very nebulous connection to the past. They remember events happening, but they can't contextualize them in a way where there's a logical sequence of events and causality that occurs. And so that's why conditional hypotheticals don't end up working for them. They can't think of an alternate way that things are going to happen. But I think there's actually more than this. So I think maybe at a little bit higher IQ, 95 or 100, people simply can't understand the difference between groups and individuals. They can't understand how some group impact doesn't have anything to do with what individuals do. So I make a video on boomer hate. Why do people hate baby boomers? And then you get a bunch of baby boomers that come in and be like, oh, I'm really good, and I didn't do any of these things. And it's like, well, you're kind of proving my point about the baby boomers' ego. But more than that, you don't understand the difference between individuals and groups. You don't get that the aggregate impact, the total impact of the group, is why people don't like baby boomers. It's not just they had a bad experience with one baby boomer. Lots of people had bad experiences with lots of baby boomers, and then there's a large societal impact from the choices, the total choices that baby boomers made. That doesn't have anything to do with individual choices. Yeah, my parents didn't divorce, but the large amount of divorces that baby boomers chose to do had an impact on society and the individuals that were in it. So there's a difference between what a group does in total and what individuals do by themselves. And some people simply can't understand that. So if you say, well, there's this problem with this ethnicity's criminality, and they're like, but I know, my friend Bob isn't like that. It's like, that doesn't change the total aggregate impact. That doesn't change the total group and the way that those things are operating, right? They just don't understand the difference between groups and individuals. And I think there's another one. This is another one that I saw on Twitter yesterday, is people can't understand the difference between an object and a subject when it comes to things like games or fiction. That is to say, they think you must identify with a character you control in a video game. So it's perplexing. They think, well, if somebody is enjoying playing a female character, it's because they're trans. It's like, but what if I don't identify with that character? It's like, but you do, that you're playing it, so you do identify as that character. It's like, no, I don't identify as a car when I press the gas pedals, do I? But I realize that there are people who actually do identify as a car in a way. And now this sounds really weird, but think about when you're driving and somebody points to a car and basically personifies the car and says, like, what's he doing? They understand that there's a person driving the car, but there's a little bit of a personification for it. So in a way, we identify that cars are people and people are cars because there's people in them. But you wouldn't say that you are a car when you step on the gas pedal. You say, I am turning, right? Versus I am turning the car. So most people don't, when they say I am turning, they don't think like I am the car and I am turning, but rather I'm engaging in an action that's causing me and the car to turn. It's the same thing with video games. If I play a character, I say, I'm going to jump over this orc. It's like, see, you are identifying as your female character and you're trans. It's like, no, I'm not. I happen to like the aesthetic appearance of a female character. That doesn't mean I think I am a female or that I think that I'm somehow enacting a female experience by playing a female character on screen. There's like a total disconnect with people that think this way. This might explain some of our like modern problems. So they can't understand the difference between identifying, in other words, fantasizing themselves as a character, and simply experiencing a story with that character. I imagine people that read, if you read fan fiction, this is what people are doing, is that they're engaged, they are the character themselves, which is a little bit weird. Saw another thing that was like, this is a difference between boys and girls sometimes. Like boys want to be Batman, girls want Batman to be them. But I think it's a deeper level thing. It's like a thinking that if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, the character needs to be in a wheelchair. They need to be wheelchair accessible dungeons because I'm in a wheelchair and my character's in a wheelchair. It's like, you are not your character, right? Your character doesn't exist. It's just a figment of your imagination. It's something that you use to play a game. It's a stand-in for you. It's something you control. It's like a machine. It's not a real thing. And it's the same thing with video games. And I think there's like maybe another breakpoint above that somewhere where people simply don't understand probability at all. They honestly cannot conceive of probability. I've come into so many people that simply cannot understand how probability works at all. And I'll give you an example. In fact, I'll give you the most frequent example I run into, which is people thinking that some percentage or rate, some statistic having to do with a large data set or group converts into a probability on the individual scale, which in most cases it does not. And a really good example is divorce rates. So it's like 40% of marriages end in divorce. We just take that as a given. Well, that means my marriage has a 40% chance of ending in divorce. It's like, it doesn't work that way. That's like asking, what's the chance that you're going to get a speeding ticket today? Some days I can say it's 0% because I don't get in the car. And if when I get in the car, I don't drive over the speed limit. So in other words, you're in control over whether you get a speeding ticket any given day. Likewise, divorce is not a dice roll. It's not a random event that happens to you that you can't really control. It's the result of the actions of two people in a relationship. Therefore, it's not subject to probability. It's a bit of a gambler's fallacy. It's thinking past events affect future events. Well, this is a kind of like, 40% of other people got divorced, therefore I have a 40% chance of getting divorced. Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's just like saying 40% of other people dug a hole, therefore there's a 40% chance I'm going to dig a hole. It's like, well, you can choose to dig a hole or not to dig a hole. But this concept literally cannot be understood by some people. They cannot understand probability. And there's no way you can get in there. There's no analogy that you can make that will make them understand something that they simply can't understand. They can't compute it. They can't understand probability at all. So that's maybe a higher level breakpoint. I don't know what the IQ would be. It'd be really interesting to study these things and see, we'll test their IQ, and then we'll give them some of these scenarios for them to try to think about. Probability, I think, would be a little bit on the higher IQ side. Probability is really hard to understand, I guess, because there's so many people who don't understand it. And then conditional hypotheticals would be like, oh, that's pretty low. And I guess the lowest would be like, what are you going to do today that's going to change tomorrow? And they'd be like, I don't know what I'll do. I don't even know what I'm going to do 2 minutes from now. So I don't know. Leave me some of your thoughts. Like, what are some other concepts, some ideas that some people just can't understand? There's something where they don't have a high enough IQ to really grasp what the concept is and what it's talking about. The difference between subject and object, the difference between a conditional hypothetical, or the difference between groups and individuals, or probability and general rates of large sets of data or large sets of events. So anyway, let me know what you think down below. I'd be interested to hear what people have to say about it. And you can tell me, if you hadn't eaten breakfast yesterday, how would you feel? I'll see you next time.